A little girl asked a billionaire to pretend to be her dad, just for one day, and the billionaire paused his world for the little girl. What began as a stranger's request turned into something no one saw coming. Stay with us, because this story will remind you that sometimes family isn't found, it's chosen. And remember to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Julian Grant wasn't just wealthy, he was wealth personified. In Seattle's financial circles, he was a legend who preferred silence over spectacle and contracts over conversations. The man behind Grant Technologies, he was a black tech billionaire who moved through meetings like a blade through paper and was known for terminating partnerships over a single typo in a proposal. That's why the corner market incident was so jarring. He stood near the register that afternoon, coat flawless, posture upright, phone in hand. When the cashier handed him a glass bottle, Julian set it down with a click. "This is warm," he said calmly. "I asked for a chilled one." The cashier, barely in her 20s and visibly rattled, glanced at the receipt. I thought that was—" "You thought wrong," he said, adjusting the French cuff on his navy jacket. "And now I'm late." He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. His presence did all the speaking. Behind him, murmurs spread through the restless line. A few sighed audibly, but Julian didn't flinch. His time was not to be wasted, not by underpaid clerks, not by system errors, and certainly not by such confusion. And then came a voice that shattered the entire scene, not with anger, but with startling innocence. "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy, just for one day?" He turned, brows knitting slightly. A little girl, maybe 6, stood a few feet behind him. Her hoodie was faded pink, her socks mismatched, one neon green, the other purple. Her sneakers had clearly seen better days, and her ribbon was tied unevenly into golden curls that framed her small, serious face. But her eyes were steady, wide, ocean blue, and impossibly sincere. A few seconds later, a breathless young woman hurried into the aisle, crouching next to the child. "Sophie," she said, pulling the girl gently toward her. "You can't just run off like that." She looked up at Julian, flushed, embarrassed, clearly exhausted. Her coat was threadbare at the sleeves, and her braid was loose and half undone. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. Sometimes she says things she doesn't mean." "Yes, I do," Sophie said without hesitation. "Tomorrow is Dad Day at school. Everyone's bringing their daddies. I don't have one. But I thought maybe he could help." Julian stood frozen, the complaint about the water already a fading echo. There was something in the girl's tone that he hadn't heard in years, something without artifice, without performance, just a small child, looking at a stranger, hoping he might fill a space left empty. "I'm Rachel," the woman said finally, "Rachel Moore. I work the afternoon shift at the Fremont Library and the night shift at the Mercer Diner." Her voice caught, just a little. "We're not asking for anything. She just misses something she never really had." Julian looked down at Sophie. Most kids her age would have hidden behind their mother by now, but she stood there still, wide-eyed, waiting, as if she had decided something about him already. He took a breath. "What time is Dad Day?" Rachel blinked. 10 a.m. Julian looked back at Sophie. "I'll be there." Her face lit up, brighter than the holiday lights strung across the store windows. "Really? But just for one day," he added quietly. And with that, Julian Grant, the man who built his world on logic and walls, turned and walked out. Not with his Stillwater, but with a promise that stirred something long dormant in the deepest, quietest part of him. The next morning, the wind off the Puget Sound moved in sharp gusts, tugging at jacket hems and umbrellas alike. Julian Grant stood outside a small brick elementary school in Ballard, his tailored coat buttoned against the cold, his shoes polished to a mirror sheen. He looked entirely out of place against the backdrop of finger-painted windows and cartoon mascots, but he didn't fidget. He never fidgeted. Beside him on the bench sat Rachel Moore, hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm paper cup of gas station coffee. She was quieter than yesterday, more guarded now that the surreal encounter was becoming real. Her hair was pulled back in a neater braid this time, but the dark circles under her eyes were still there, deeper now in the morning light. "She doesn't really understand what it means to have a dad," Rachel said softly, breaking the silence between them. She was still in diapers when her father passed. But kids know when something's missing. They feel the empty spaces. Julian didn't answer immediately. His eyes followed Sophie, who was skipping along the low curb like a tightrope artist. Her tiny backpack bounced with each step. A crooked yellow ribbon trailed behind her in the wind, untamed and joyful. "She's bright," he said finally. "She's everything," Rachel replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Julian nodded once but didn't speak again. His hands were folded neatly in his lap, the edge of his luxury watch catching the sunlight. He was still the man who made headlines in IPOs, but today something about him looked softer, like a man trying to remember something he'd long forgotten. "I didn't mean for her to put you on the spot yesterday," Rachel added after a pause. "She's different. She feels things more deeply than most kids. She notices when people don't look at her mother the same way as other parents, or when birthday parties go unattended." "I don't do kids," Julian said, his voice as blunt as always. Rachel tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing with wry amusement. "I didn't think you did, which is why I'm still trying to figure out why you said yes." He turned to face her fully, and for the first time, he really looked at her. Not just at her fatigue or her embarrassment, but at her resilience, the way she held herself, the quiet fire beneath her calm. "I'm trying to figure that out myself," he said. Just then, Sophie came bounding back toward them, her cheeks pink from the wind. "Come on," she said breathlessly. "It's time. They're calling the daddies." Julian rose, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve, hesitating only a moment before extending his hand. Sophie grabbed it without a second thought, her small fingers wrapping tightly around his. Rachel stood behind them, watching in silence as the two walked through the school doors hand in hand, Sophie with uncontained joy, and Julian with something new etched into his posture. Not hesitation, not detachment, something dangerously close to belonging. Inside the classroom, it was controlled chaos. Laughter echoed off the walls, construction paper hearts dangled from the ceiling, and the scent of glue sticks clung to the air. Signs marked every corner. "Daddy and me painting, build a fort station, superhero cape design." It was the kind of place where imagination ran wild and rules bent to the will of joy. Julian Grant stood at the threshold, utterly foreign in this universe of glitter, crayons, and crooked name tags. Dressed in a slate gray coat and polished shoes, he looked like a stock photo of Wall Street had wandered into a kindergarten classroom. But Sophie didn't notice. She tugged him inside without hesitation, eyes shining. "Come on, we have to do every station." For the next hour, the coldest man in Seattle found himself kneeling on foam mats, cutting construction paper into vague shapes, trying, and failing, to tape together a cardboard castle that kept collapsing on one side. He wore a paper crown glittered with sequins, helped decorate a Play-Doh pizza with gummy bears, and even posed for a Super Daddy Polaroid next to a 7-foot cutout of a cartoon tiger. Other parents noticed. Some recognized him, mouths opening in disbelief before quickly closing again. A few whispered behind hands, nudging each other with subtle head tilts. Julian Grant, billionaire, boardroom king, and media-shy founder of Grant Technologies, was currently sitting cross-legged in a sea of beanbags trying to draw a rainbow. Very badly. Sophie didn't care. She laughed each time he mispronounced a storybook character's name, clapped when he managed to tape 2 popsicle sticks together without dropping them, and held his hand like it had always belonged to her. Then came story time. All the children curled up on beanbags while their fathers read to them. Sophie climbed into Julian's lap as though it were the most natural place in the world. She handed him a handmade book she'd written and illustrated herself, a thin packet of stapled paper titled, "My Daddy is a Superhero." The cover had a stick figure, in a cape, holding a girl's hand under a sun with smiling clouds. Julian stared at it. "Read it," Sophie whispered, leaning back against his chest. He cleared his throat. "My daddy fights monsters under the bed. He brings me waffles and sings silly songs," he read, his voice steadying as he went. "He never forgets the small things. He doesn't like chaos, but he makes room for my messes. He never yells. He holds my hand when I cry. And when I laugh, he laughs too." Sophie let out a soft sigh, her tiny body relaxed into his. "You feel safe," she murmured, eyes fluttering closed. "Like a real daddy." Julian couldn't speak, not for a moment. He looked up and caught Rachel's eyes through the classroom window. She stood just outside, arms folded, watching them in silence. Her gaze wasn't suspicious or questioning. It was reverent, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Julian looked down at the child in his arms. She hadn't asked him for a check, a promise, or a miracle. She had asked for a hand to hold, just for one day. And somehow, against all reason and logic, He realized he wanted to be that hand, even if he didn't know why yet. The next morning, the preschool classroom buzzed with the energy of cardboard crafts and sugar-fueled laughter. Above the doorway, a crayon banner read Daddy Day, colors vibrant but uneven, just like the children who had drawn them. Julian Grant walked in beside Sophie, noticeably less rigid than the day before. Gone was the sharp-edged billionaire from the corner store. In his place stood a man learning how to exist in a world that didn't run on profit margins. Sophie tugged at his hand as they made their way to the back of the room. Her ribbon was crooked again, her shoes untied, and she looked radiant. "I saved us a spot," she whispered. They sat in a semicircle with the other fathers and kids. Julian didn't try to blend in. He couldn't have if he wanted to, but this time, he didn't seem to mind. His gaze stayed on Sophie, not on the people around them. The teacher clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, time for circle stories. Tell us one thing, real or imaginary, that makes your daddy special." One by one, the children spoke. Some mumbled, some shouted, some told stories about playing catch or eating pancakes. Then it was Sophie's turn. She stood slowly, her tiny hands balled into fists at her sides, her voice steady but soft. "My daddy takes me on adventures," she said. "We have tea with tigers, and he makes scary things less scary. He doesn't yell. He reads me stories that help me dream." Her eyes flicked to Julian. "And sometimes he shows up, just when I need him." No one moved. No one whispered. Even the teacher stayed quiet. Sophie sat down and took Julian's hand like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Just outside the window, Rachel stood with Sophie's forgotten lunchbox in hand. She had only come to drop it off, but when she saw Julian sitting there, glitter in his hair, a child against his side, she froze. Then she heard Sophie's voice carry through the glass, every word pulling at something too long buried. Rachel pressed a hand against the cold pain, breath catching in her throat. Inside, Julian didn't speak. He just held Sophie's hand a little tighter. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by paper crowns and tiny shoes, the boundaries he had built around his life, the ones meant to keep pain out, began to fall in earnest. That evening, the rooftop bistro overlooked the water, quiet and glowing under soft string lights. A table for 3 waited near the railing, set with linen napkins and a flickering candle. Sophie climbed into her seat, eyes wide at the view, her sparkly shoes kicking beneath the table. She had brought a folded drawing with her, carefully tucked into her backpack like something sacred. Julian sat across from her, his coat off for once, his posture still composed but less guarded. Rachel sat between them, calm but watchful. She hadn't expected him to follow through, not twice. "Do they have mac and cheese with crunchy bits on top?" Sophie asked. "They do now," Julian replied, signaling the waiter without missing a beat. Rachel gave him a look, but he only said, "Just for tonight." Dinner came and went in soft laughter. Sophie talked about the library's reading corner and how she planned to be a dolphin doctor and part-time astronaut. Julian listened, really listened. And then, over dessert, it happened. "Daddy," Sophie said, without hesitation. "Can I show you my drawing now?" Rachel sat up, startled, but Julian stopped her with a quiet glance. "Just for tonight," he said. Sophie unfolded the paper, crayon on printer paper, 3 stick figures smiling beneath a yellow sun, one tall, one medium, one small, wearing a crown. The caption read, "Me, Mommy, and my daddy." Julian stared at it. His voice came low. "I had a son and a wife. Elise and James." Rachel said nothing. "He wanted me to help with a volcano project. I told him I had a meeting. I'd do the next one." Julian paused. That was the morning Elise drove him to school. A drunk driver hit them 2 blocks from the building. Sophie watched him, silent, waiting. Rachel reached out and placed her hand over his. No apology, no pity, just presence. "I missed it," Julian said. "All of it. And I've been trying to outrun that silence ever since." Sophie climbed onto her knees, leaned forward, and pressed her tiny palm to his cheek. "If you were a bad daddy before," she said, "maybe now you can be a good one. For me." Julian didn't answer. He just pulled her into his arms and held on, like he was holding something he never thought he'd get back. 2 days after the rooftop dinner, Rachel was folding napkins behind the counter at the Mercer Diner when her manager approached, clipboard in hand, eyes avoiding hers. The look said everything before he even opened his mouth. "I don't want drama," he muttered, "but you can't work here anymore." She froze. "Why?" You brought Julian Grant in. People upstairs noticed. Makes it look like you're angling for something. It's a conflict. I'm sorry. You think I planned this? It doesn't matter. Perception is everything. By nightfall, Rachel sat at a bus stop in the rain, coat pulled tight, Sophie nestled beside her. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. Her hands trembled. Sophie leaned in. Mommy, are we in trouble? No, baby, she whispered. Just tired. A black car pulled up. The back door opened before the engine cut. Julian stepped out, spotted them, and walked straight to Sophie. No one hurts your mommy, he said, kneeling. Not while I'm here. Sophie hugged him. Rachel stared, overwhelmed. She lost her job because of me, he told her, and I'm not letting that stand. 2 days later, Rachel walked through the revolving glass doors of the Grant Initiative, the philanthropic arm of Julian's empire. The lobby was sleek, all natural wood and soft lighting, with a quiet hum of purpose in the air. She hadn't taken the job for charity. She'd taken it because Julian had looked her in the eyes and said, I need someone who gives a damn. You haven't stopped giving, even when it cost you. She had barely crossed the lobby when she heard fast footsteps and a familiar shout. Daddy! Sophie sprinted toward Julian, leaping into his arms. Did you miss your little girl? Always, he replied, holding her close. Staff watched in silence. The man they knew as a billionaire now looked like something else entirely, a father, claimed not by wealth, but by love. And for the first time, Rachel didn't feel like they were borrowing joy. It felt real. Then on a quiet Sunday morning, the knock came early, sharp, deliberate, and out of place. Rachel opened the door to find Caleb Whitaker, her late husband's brother, standing on the porch like he owned it. He hadn't called. He hadn't visited since the funeral. But now, after years of silence, he had come to stake a claim. I hear you've got a billionaire playing dad, he said flatly. That's not family. That's convenience. I'm filing for guardianship. Rachel stood in the doorway, unmoving. You've never even sent her a birthday card. Exactly why I need to step in, he replied. She needs structure, not stories. Behind her, Julian appeared, silent, calm, but focused. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Caleb looked at him once, scoffed, and walked away. A week later, the courtroom was silent but heavy. Rows of wooden benches lined the chamber. The judge sat high, flipping through the file. Julian sat beside Sophie at the front, her small hand tucked tightly into his. Across from them sat Caleb, postured, polished, confident. This man, Caleb began, pointing toward Julian, is not family. He's a temporary distraction. He's known the child for weeks. I want what's best for her. Blood ties. Real structure. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge raised a hand. Does love hold weight in your view, Mr. Whitaker? Caleb hesitated. It's not enough. At that moment, Sophie shifted in her seat. Slowly she stood. The room quieted. Even the bailiff paused. She stepped to the center of the room, trembling slightly but holding her ground. My name is Sophie Moore, she said clearly, and I already have a daddy. Whispers spread instantly. Caleb sat frozen. He reads me stories. He tucks me in. He makes my mom smile again, Sophie continued. He shows up, not just once, every time. She turned toward Julian, voice softening. I picked him. I don't want anyone else. Julian blinked hard. Rachel covered her mouth. The judge sat back in his chair, silent for a long moment. In light of the child's testimony, he said finally, and the absence of any prior bond between Mr. Whitaker and the minor, this court denies the petition for guardianship. Rachel gasped. Sophie ran back into Julian's arms, and he held her. This time, not as someone trying to fill a space, but as someone who belonged there, not just for one day, but for good. The days that followed the court ruling were quiet, almost unreal. The chaos had passed, but something deeper had settled in its place, a rhythm. Sophie's bedtime stories came with silly voices. School pickups came with packed lunches and paper crowns. Rachel's evenings no longer ended in exhaustion, but in warmth. Julian had become part of everything. He didn't try to take over. He simply showed up again and again, until presence became second nature. Then one evening he surprised them both. He brought them to the rooftop garden of his building, transformed with fairy lights and soft candle glow. Snow dusted the edges of the stone path. A small table waited near the railing, set for 3. At Sophie's place sat a small box tied with ribbon. She opened it carefully. Inside was a silver necklace with one word engraved, family. On the back, forever. Her breath caught. It's for me. Julian knelt beside her. You showed me what family means, he said, and I want you to know. You'll always have me. She threw her arms around him, eyes shining. You're my forever daddy now. He kissed the top of her head, then stood and turned to Rachel. You and Sophie walked into my life like a storm, he said, pulling a second box from his coat. And somehow, you made it a home. Rachel froze, tears already forming. This time, I'm not pretending. I don't want temporary. I want real. I want us. He opened the box. A simple ring, timeless and steady. Will you be my family? Rachel nodded, too moved to speak. She stepped into his arms, holding him like she'd been waiting a lifetime. Sophie clapped from her seat. Can I be the flower girl? Julian laughed. You're going to be more than that. 6 weeks later, they married in a small chapel on the edge of the city. White roses lined the aisle. Sunlight poured through tall windows. Sophie led the way, scattering petals and waving at guests like a princess in sneakers. Julian stood at the altar, hands only slightly trembling. When Rachel appeared in a simple ivory dress, he forgot the world. Their vows were not elaborate, but they were honest. I didn't believe in second chances, Julian said, voice steady, until I met two girls who made me want to become someone worth loving. Rachel smiled through tears. I thought love meant sacrifice, but you showed me it can also mean coming home. Sophie stood between them, gripping both their hands. After the ceremony, Julian lifted her into his arms. You picked me first, he whispered. She leaned in, smiling. Best choice I ever made. That night, the three of them danced barefoot in their living room. No music, just laughter, light, and love. They hadn't been born a family, but they had chosen to be one, and that made it forever. What does it mean to you to be chosen? Not by blood, but by heart. Some people walk into your life by chance. Others arrive when your heart is still too broken to open. But the rarest ones, like Julian, don't ask for space. They earn it, not with promises, but with presence. If this story reminded you that love can be learned, earned, and reborn, like this video, share it, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.